The Denver Broncos finished with a 7-10 record. Head coach Vic Fangio is out. And a ton of key players are also probably out the door this year in free agency. There's a lot to break down for the Denver Broncos going into next season. They've got some really good pieces on this roster. They've got some really good draft capital as well after the Von Miller trade. And GM George Paton has a lot of work ahead of him. When you look at his history coming from the Minnesota Vikings, he's made some really good moves as an assistant GM in the past and now as the actual lead GM there in Denver. And I think he is the right guy to get this team on track. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the Denver Broncos, a potential offseason preview, certain moves that I do expect the Denver Broncos to actually make when you look at some of the history of their general manager, things he likes to prioritize in free agency, also in the NFL draft. We're going to cover it all here in today's video. So if you do enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well. If you are new, it does really mean a lot to us. Now, let's get into it here with our Denver Broncos offseason preview. They've got a lot to play for. They've got a big time chance to take a massive step forward, and there's a few different ways they can do it. In today's video, we're going to talk about the head coach position. And of course, we're going to name some of their head coach candidates after I did some research on who they've been interviewing and looking at. We're also going to talk about the quarterback position. I think that's really where it starts and stops for Denver this offseason. They have to find a way to address quarterback, roster overview as well. We're going to look at the key players they already have on their roster going into next year, key guys under contract on both sides of the football. And then we're also going to take a look at who they could be losing in free agency. Then we're going to turn our eyes to free agency, who they could potentially bring in. They do have about $45 million in salary cap space, so they've got some flexibility to make some moves if they want to. And then lastly, we're going to end with some NFL draft targets, some guys that I could see them looking at hard on days 1, 2, and 3 of the NFL draft. There's some really good options out here for Denver. I think there's a lot of ways this team could really address some of their needs. So without further ado, let's get into it here with the Denver Broncos. Broncos fans, again, welcome to the channel. Subscribe if you are new. And let's get into it here with the head coaching candidates. You see, I'm starting off with Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. They are tied to him. Brian Callahan as well, offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's overseen a massive improvement in a short time when you've had talent there with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. The issue is, does Denver have those type of players? I'm not exactly sure. And you could have the same regard for Eric Bieniemy, who has Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I don't think Denver quite has those type of weapons. Nathaniel Hackett, offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. Now, this is one that could make some sense to me, specifically with a key free agent, how he feels about him. Perhaps that could make some sense. Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator from the Dallas Cowboys. He is a potential target as well. And let's stay right there in Dallas with Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator there for the Dallas Cowboys. Some media posts, even in Denver, are saying that he is the favorite to land the position. Of course, he's been a head coach in the past. He's defensive minded. And he's done a really good job with the Dallas Cowboys this season. Kevin O'Connell, another offensive coordinator from the LA Rams. A lot of people are labeling him Sean McVay 2.0. We've heard that in the past before, though. But I think Kevin O'Connell is someone who is on an upward trajectory here that could make some sense. And then looking at Jerod Mayo, interior linebacker coach of the New England Patriots, of course, had a famous, storied career for New England playing at that linebacker spot. He's a multiple-time champion and someone that I think Denver, who right now has a lot of questions at that linebacker spot, you bring in Jerod Mayo as your head coach, that could make some sense for me in terms of getting more out of that position specifically. However, again, he doesn't have coordinator experience, doesn't have head coach experience, so I don't necessarily love that hire as much. For me, the three guys I want to talk about the most here are Eric Bieniemy. I think that he should be considered one of the favorites. He's been around a great offensive mind in Andy Reid, learning from him. You're also grabbing a guy who's in division, so he's going to be able to help you with game planning against the Chiefs twice a year, which is essential if you ever want to win that division. The AFC West is highly contested with the Chargers, the Chiefs. It's good to bring in a guy who knows those opponents, and that's what Eric Bieniemy is. Then you also have to look at a guy like Dan Quinn, who has had experience in the NFL. He's been successful in the past, of course, led the Falcons to a Super Bowl, didn't win it, but did get them there. He's a very, very smart defensive-minded coach. You pair him with a good offensive coordinator that he'll hopefully bring in. You're looking at a good 1-2 punch there. And then a guy like Nathaniel Hackett, I think, does make some sense because of his style of offense under LaFleur. I think he has a good understanding of how to use motion to create space. Jerry Jeudy is someone who I think could take a massive leap with an offensive-minded guy like Nathaniel Hackett. For me, if you get Jeudy on the move, his ability to run short to intermediate routes, instantly becomes a little bit more productive in a Nathaniel Hackett styled offense, I think. Going into the future, though, for me, if I was the Denver Broncos, I would hire Eric Bieniemy. Assuming he has a solid interview, I would assume he does. I think that he makes the most sense for Denver when you consider what he knows about that division. He's going to know some of the Chiefs' strengths and weaknesses. He's going to know some of the Chargers' strengths and weaknesses, and he's going to know the Raiders' strengths and weaknesses. And if you're Denver, you need to start winning those in-division games. If you go above 500 in division, there's a chance you walk away with the division. This year, they struggled a little bit against the divisional opponents, but I think the Broncos should focus on stealing Eric Bieniemy away from Kansas City. Moving forward now into our quarterback position, I think this is another big topic of discussion here for Denver. You see, I've got under contract here Drew Lock. However, are they a believer in him? I don't think they should be. He's actually shown a little bit of regression from his rookie year where he showed a little bit of promise in the few starts he got. Vic Fangio, I don't think did him any favors. Drew Lock, probably not going to be the guy. He is under contract though, so you do have a guy who started NFL games before. You could fall back on that, which maybe empowers them to go for the big splash and say, if we don't get a big time player, we have someone who has started before, and I think can at least steer the ship a little bit in Drew Lock. Maybe that makes them really interested in making a big time move for a guy like Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be a free agent because he can opt out of his contract. I expect him to opt out of his contract. And I think him going to Denver would be a really good combination. Like I said, they have the cap space to bring him in. They have about $45 million. They could pay him $25 to $35 million and bring him in comfortably and even make another move or two on top of that. So there is avenues for the Denver Broncos to add Aaron Rodgers. I think he has to be the top of the list. He's probably going to be the MVP again this season. That would make him 2 times in a row MVP. And if you can add that type of player to Denver, they become a Super Bowl contender. They really do. Aaron Rodgers is that good. He can elevate this team. And they've got some young defensive players that you really got to get hopeful for as well. This Denver team would be really complete with the quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. Deshaun Watson, he's interesting. To me, I would prefer going after Rodgers than Watson, even though Watson's younger, just because you're not going to have to use a first-round pick to get Aaron Rodgers. Whereas to get Deshaun Watson, you probably have to use 2, maybe even 3. And that's a massive difference when you're team building. I think the Broncos, if you add a top-tier quarterback, they'd become Super Bowl contenders, but being able to keep and mortgage those first-round picks for later use gives you a lot more flexibility, and I'd prefer to get Rodgers, try and win a Super Bowl sooner than later, and hold on to my first-round picks. That's the best way to go about it. Kirk Cousins, another guy I don't think that Broncos fans should be ruling out. Denver was tied to him when Elway was still running the ship. Of course, he's still involved there in Denver. And then also, George Paton was there when the Vikings signed him. Those two guys both have connections to Kirk Cousins. They both had shown interest in Kirk Cousins when they were in certain roles. And now I think Kirk Cousins going to Denver via trade does make some sense. Probably could get him for a second-round pick, would be my guess. They do have pick 40 this year, so perhaps pick 40 goes out the door. I'm not sure if Minnesota's absolutely sold on taking that offer, but I do think it is a possibility. Then you look at a couple other options here. You got Mitch Trubisky, Marcus Mariota. These are 2 examples of guys you could sign like a Teddy Bridgewater, where they come in, be a spot starter for you if you can't really fill that position. And if you're not sold on Drew Lock, I don't necessarily know if either of those guys are massive upgrades over Drew Lock. Mitch Trubisky, of course, is getting some momentum just based off of how bad Matt Nagy's offense had been without him. Surprisingly, I still don't think people should be buying into Trubisky like that, though. But I do see it as a possibility that he does end up in Denver, or you have to look at the draft. They do have pick number 9. Maybe they take a guy like Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett. There's also Sam Howell out there. There's a few guys that could impress throughout the pro day combine periods that maybe Denver falls in love with. You know how John Elway is with his big, tall, white quarterbacks. Now, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen for sure. I would opt for them going with Aaron Rodgers. I think they have to really push hard for him. And I would love to see Aaron Rodgers in Denver. I think he really elevates what that team would be. Key offensive players under contract. And this is why I think they could be a Super Bowl contender when we look at the skill players that they have and also the offensive line they already have built up. Drew Lock at quarterback, we've talked about him, but you have running back Javonte Williams and also running back Mike Boone. I want to mention him because I don't think a lot of people outside of Denver really know what this guy can be. He's a really good complementary running back in my estimation. You run him out of single back a lot. He's probably not going to take a lot of snaps out of the shotgun, but he can get downhill quick. He's got pretty good downhill speed. When he's already got a head start, he probably doesn't have the best acceleration in the world, but he's a physical runner, can run between the tackles. And I think he's actually a pretty good complement to Javonte Williams. And the things Javonte Williams gives you is a compact runner of the football himself, who also has some good burst and speed. Then wide receivers, you're set here. You've got 3 really good ones, 4 if you include KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick. I'm a believer in all 3 of those guys. Of course, they did extend Tim Patrick, gave him a little bit more money than I thought he was going to get. But at the end of the day, they've got a good wide receiver trio. And if you insert a guy like Aaron Rodgers, this team all of a sudden becomes elite offensively. Noah Fant, one of the best tight ends in the entire NFL because of his ability to make plays after the catch. Good athlete as well. He's tough to cover on outbreaking routes. And then you look at this offensive line: Garrett Bowles, Graham Glasgow, Quinn Miners, Dalton Reisner, Natane Moody, and also Lloyd Cushenberry. You've got your center of the future. You've got some decent guard play, and you've got 1 tackle. I do like Garrett Bowles a lot. Quinn Miners, of course, is going to be that number 6 offensive lineman for them right now. And you still need another offensive tackle there. Don't get me wrong. I think Denver needs to find a way to address offensive tackle yet at some point, especially if you make a move for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe that number 9 overall pick is spent on an offensive tackle. That would be something I would like to see. Moving forward here, though, into the key defensive players under contract, I got Edge Bradley Chubb, D lineman Draymond Jones, Shelby Harris, Mike Purcell. And then you look at that secondary: Patrick Surtain II, Ronald Darby, Michael Ojemudia, Justin Simmons. That is an elite start to a secondary. They need a strong safety now that Kareem Jackson's a free agent. It's also crazy because they're losing 2 really good secondary members outside of Kareem Jackson when you consider they're losing Fuller and also Bryce Callahan. And yet their cornerback room looks like it's going to be really, really good still. That's incredible. They had 5 really, really good corners. That is tough to do. They've built this team up really, really well. Patrick Surtain, one of the best picks in last year's draft. I firmly believe that. And Bradley Chubb, I put him on the graphic here because once he's healthy again, he needs to not only have a great year, but he needs to have the best year of his career. Of course, no Von Miller anymore. George Paton did trade him away to the Los Angeles Rams. Got really good value for him in my estimation when you're looking at grabbing a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick. That's phenomenal acquisition for the Denver Broncos because they needed to move on from him. He wasn't going to be back next year. Von Miller had run his course in Denver. Bradley Chubb, though, he's got to be the guy now. He's got to step up. I think he's capable of doing it. Of course, a former top 10 pick, extremely talented edge rusher. I think he can be the guy. I would love to see them grab another edge next to him. Shelby Harris, I think one of the more underrated players in the entire NFL with what he can do in the run game defensively. I also think he generates decent pressure up the middle. And then you look at the corners. Again, Patrick Surtain, Ronald Darby, a little more expensive than I thought he was going to be last offseason. But then Michael Ojemudia, who I think can be a really nice slot corner for them. And Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in football, probably doesn't get talked enough about. This Broncos defense has a ton of talent. Of course, they are losing a lot of guys to free agency, though. Let's look at who they could be potentially losing. Quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. I don't exactly expect him to be back. Now, he could be if they don't go with one of those other quarterbacks I talked about earlier. And I think Bridgewater is a solid game manager. I just don't think he really elevates what this team could be. Melvin Gordon at the running back spot. He was a good fill-in for them. I liked what he brought, but I think it is time for them to turn the tables to Javonte Williams. To me, this isn't even considered really a loss, losing Melvin Gordon, because you have the player of the future in Javonte Williams. I think it's just time that they fully transition to him. Edge Stephen Weatherly, D-tackle Shamar Stephen, 2 examples of former Minnesota Vikings that George Paton does bring in back into Denver. I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Weatherly or Shamar Stephen find their way back into Denver, but they are headed to free agency currently. Linebackers Josie Jewell, Kenny Young, and A.J. Johnson. This is really the concern position for me. You're losing your 3 best interior linebackers. They need to find ways to target other linebackers in free agency. There is one that I'm absolutely in love with the idea of them signing, and I almost think it's a foregone conclusion, honestly, at this point. But those 3 guys, I think that you have to try and bring back 1, maybe 2 of them. Kenny Young's the one that really sticks out to me in terms of what his longer-term upside could be for Denver and his athleticism in the middle. Kyle Fuller, Bryce Callahan, I talked about those 2 already. You can afford to lose them. Now, it's tough. I think they would prefer to keep Callahan there if they could, but you're bound to lose those guys. I think Bryce Callahan's going to go to a different team, a team that badly needs slot cornerback play. And the Broncos, I think they're ready to turn it over to And then Kareem Jackson. It hurts to lose him. He's a little bit older, but he's been a solid safety for Denver for some time. This is a lot of talent to be losing in one free agency period. They're losing 10 really key guys, but I think that they're actually going to be fine with the way they've set themselves up for the future. It's hard to lose this many talented players and not see regression, but I actually think the Broncos are set up for progression. I think they're going to be a team that probably takes a step forward. They haven't made the playoffs since 2015, but I think they have the pieces to get there. I really do. They're in the tough AFC West, though. You have to deal with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, assuming he's back with Vegas. They've got some good teams right in that division. It's tough to win the AFC West. It's tough to even take second or third in the AFC West. The fact that the Chargers didn't make the playoffs this year shows how strong the AFC West really is. The Broncos, though, I think that they have the pieces to really move up, improve what they've got on this team, and take a step forward. Moving into free agency here, we're looking at an estimated cap space of about $45.5 million. That is a lot of money to target some key guys. So let's look at who I think they could be targeting. Quarterback spot in free agency, Aaron Rodgers. He is the guy. Denver needs to walk away with Aaron Rodgers. If they do, I could see them winning the Super Bowl next season. That's how good this team could be with a great quarterback. If they can't get him, I could see him settling for Mitch Trubisky or Marcus Mariota like we talked about earlier. However, I could see Teddy Bridgewater just walking back into the fold as well. Offensive tackle. Now, this is where it gets interesting here. Garrett Bowles has been a left tackle in his career, but if you could sign a guy like Teron Armstead out of New Orleans, who's due for a massive payday, by the way, I don't think New Orleans is going to be able to hold on to him. He could be a franchise tackle for you at left tackle, maybe kick Garrett Bowles over to right tackle. It gets a little complicated because he is a natural left tackle. Teron Armstead is. He's played his whole career there, but he's phenomenal. He is an elite left tackle. And you look at Trent Brown as well, someone who is going to be a free agent this offseason. Patriots probably would like to keep Trent Brown, but he might be due for another big payday. Of course, the Raiders gave him one a few years ago, and I think he could solve that right tackle spot. He's played right tackle for most of his career. And if you're looking at the Denver Broncos, he could really be the guy that addresses that need for you. Edge spot here, I've got Anthony Barr, Hassan Reddick, and then I've also added interior linebacker. Inside linebacker, I got Anthony Barr as well. Anthony Barr is going to be a Denver Bronco. I am almost certain of it. If I had to bet on anything this offseason, I would bet that Anthony Barr ends up in Denver. They need linebacker play. George Paton was there when the Minnesota Vikings drafted him in the top 10. And he's just a really good fit into what this defense is likely going to look like when you consider the weapons that they already have. My guess is they're going to run a style defense that works for what Anthony Barr is going to bring. He's a good blitzer. He's someone who can actually drop back in coverage a little bit as well. A phenomenal athlete. Even though he's getting up in age a little bit, I think that Denver does make some sense for him on a 2, maybe 3-year deal. I think this is Anthony Barr's last chance to potentially cash in free agency, and I think George Paton is going to be a guy who's willing to give him some money. He knows him well. He would love to have him. Anthony Barr almost left the Minnesota Vikings a few years back for the New York Jets. Stayed in Minnesota, and I think that was best for his career. Now I think moving on to a team like Denver, he could be the lead guy in the middle of that defense and really be the voice of the defense. I think that they need a guy like him, a veteran who's been there before, has played meaningful playoff games. Anthony Barr is a great fit. I think the only interesting thing would be is if they sign Aaron Rodgers and Anthony Barr, how those two get along, because of course Anthony Barr famously did break the collarbone of Aaron Rodgers in a very questionable sack. And then look at the safety spot, another Minnesota Viking, former Minnesota Viking here that I've got, Anthony Harris. I know he's more of a free safety, doesn't necessarily fit perfectly with Justin Simmons, but he is just a solid safety who George Paton knows well. I could see him linking himself to Anthony Harris again. And then Daniel Sorensen, another guy in division. You've gotten good looks at him from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a very, very nice, strong safety when you consider he's not going to make all the elite plays, but he's a very steady, well-rounded safety. He's played next to Tyrann Mathieu and found success in a role like that. You put him next to Justin Simmons for a year, maybe 2, and hope that you can get similar production. I think that he would be a solid pickup. Here, obviously, though, the big name on the screen is Aaron Rodgers. At the end of the day, free agency, if they walk away with Aaron Rodgers, they're the biggest winner. And if they don't, I would consider them one of the bigger losers. They need to get Aaron Rodgers. Otherwise, you have to set yourself up to trading for Deshaun Watson, sending out a bunch of assets, which I still think is a worthwhile move. But it's just a lot cleaner to go get Aaron Rodgers and then worry about dealing assets later. NFL draft picks. As we turn our eye toward the NFL draft, in round 1, they have pick 9. Rounds 2 and 3, they got picks 40, 60, 75, 91. So they've got some really good assets this year. Of course, the Von Miller trade really did set them up. Then on day 3, they have their own round 4 pick. their own round 5 pick, the Lions round 5 pick, the Eagles round 6 pick, the Lions round 7 pick, and the 49ers round 7 pick. So they've got a good collection of assets here, especially when you consider they have 11 picks in 7 rounds, and a lot of those extra picks come in rounds 2 and 3. So you've got some nice assets to work with. Of course, they're in the top half of the round in each round as well, just based on their own picks. So they're going to be able to make some really good selections here. And for day one, here's my draft targets. Quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral. If they can't get the job done, if they can't get a deal for Aaron Rodgers, or if they can't get a deal for Deshaun Watson, you have to look at the quarterback spot in the draft. Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, those are the top 2 guys this year. That's QB1, QB2. A lot of people have them in altering order. I could see either one ending up in Denver. If I had to guess, Kenny Pickett would be the more likely option, though. Ike Ekwonu, offensive tackle from NC State. He could really help Javonte Williams take another step forward. Javonte Williams was a beast down the stretch of the season. Ike Ekwonu, one of the best offensive linemen when it comes to run blocking in this year's class. He comes in to be your really strong right tackle. You could run behind him moving forward, and he really sets the edge for you in the run game. David Ojabo, he's a pick I love. I would love to see David Ojabo. He's pictured on the left there on the graphic, an edge out of Michigan. A lot of credit went to Aiden Hutchinson this year for the season he had, and it was well-deserved. But David Ojabo did nearly as much for that Michigan Wolverines defense. He's got really good speed off the edge. He's going to be able to force pressure with his bend. I think that's one of the most underrated things when it comes to pass rushers, is if you've got good bend, you can get off the edge and really generate a lot of pressure. And then also one thing, when he gets to the quarterback, he forces the ball out consistently, forced a ton of fumbles in this past season playing college football. And I think in the NFL, it's going to translate. You can play him off the left end. You can play him off the right end. He's going to be able to play up in his stance. He's going to be able to put his hand in the dirt a little bit as well. Versatile defensive edge, and I like him a lot. Devin Lloyd, Nakobe Dean, 2 linebackers here. We talked about Denver's need for a linebacker at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if George Paton spends an early pick on one. You look at what the Minnesota Vikings did when George Paton was there as an assistant GM. They took Anthony Barr in round 1. A year later, they came back, took Eric Kendricks at the top of round 2. They've been very interested in linebackers in the past when George Paton's been involved in decision making. And I wouldn't be surprised. He's looking at this Broncos defense and saying, well, we're about 1, maybe 2 pieces away from really being an elite, all-time great defense if you find an edge and interior linebacker. And here you have the option of that. Devin Lloyd, Nakobe Dean, those 2 guys are very versatile. Devin Lloyd a little bit better in pass coverage. Nakobe Dean a little bit better coming off the edge as a rusher occasionally, and also a little bit better of a thumper. My co-creator Austin likes to call him a heat-seeking missile, and I see it on film. He definitely is that kind of guy, and I think that would really enhance Denver's defense. And then safety Kyle Hamilton. To me, this guy is incredible. I don't think he'll be available at pick 9, but if he is, they have to run that pick up to the board. I don't care who else is available. I don't care if they need a quarterback. You have to draft Kyle Hamilton there, because this guy, his instincts in the secondary are insane. He could be 15 yards off the line of scrimmage and make a play about 1 or 2 yards away from the line of scrimmage on a run play. He has that type of instincts. He's got really good burst, really good acceleration, and I think he's someone who, at his size, you could play him up in the box. I think he's the perfect complement to Justin Simmons. If you guys haven't watched Kyle Hamilton enough, make sure you do that, because we have a video up on the channel of him, some of his highlights. This kid is incredible. One of the best players I think I've ever evaluated. Watching him come over, he's going to be great in the NFL. He's going to be arguably the best player in this year's class. And if you can get him 9th overall, you take him. I don't care about positional value at that point. You need to take a guy like Kyle Hamilton. He could pull this whole defense together. Day 2, got some more day 2 targets here. Safety Jaquan Brisker at the top, Penn State safety. I'm assuming that they don't land Kyle Hamilton. I think he'll be off the board by pick 9. So if you do want to find another safety, Brisker's a really good option. Then I've got 3 edges here right in a row, and I think there's a real chance that any of these 3 could end up there, especially if they don't take David Ojabo in round 1. Jermaine Johnson, he's been really productive in his career, and I think a lot of people are starting to see him as a first-round pick. I think he probably lasts into early day 2, but I see him as a first-round player myself. Drake Jackson, a guy I really like out of USC. This kid, very fast off the edge, good bend as well. He's a little bit of a downgraded version of David Ojabo, and I think the upside is actually just as high, as David Ojabo. I think he could be a really good day 2 pick. Good speed, and I think he's a good complement to Bradley Chubb. Arnold Ebiketie, even faster than Drake Jackson. This kid, another Penn State player, really can fly off the edge. He's going to be someone who, when he hits the quarterback, potential whiplash could be involved with the speed he gets there. He's really good edge. I like this kid a lot as well. Offensive tackle Daniel Falele out of Minnesota. He's pictured left on the graphic. He's a big dude. If you don't draft a guy like Eke Mekwanu, maybe you come and grab the Mauler here at right tackle. I think he could be a really good fit. One concern I have for him, he's 6'9", 400 pounds, which sounds really attractive for an offensive lineman. But against speed rushers, will he struggle a little bit? Potentially, maybe he's best suited to play guard. That doesn't really fit very well in Denver. But I do think there is a chance he could be a nice right tackle in the NFL. Chad Muma, he's also pictured there, the Wyoming linebacker. Nice, solid interior linebacker play. If they don't go into Kobe Dean, Devin Lloyd on day one, I could see Chad Muma being a late round 2 or early round 3 pickup for them. He's got interesting traits at the linebacker spot, a solid athlete, and someone who I think could pop in the middle of that Denver defense. And then Jackson Kirkland, another offensive tackle out of Washington, potentially was looked at as a round 1 pick. Had a down season this year for Washington. I think he could be a solid pickup in round 3 for this team, though. Of course, they do have 2 round 3 picks, so probably the later one is where I could see Jackson Kirkland going and really cementing that offensive line for Denver. Then moving into day 3, I've only got 4 guys targeted here. It's hard on day 3 to really find a ton of targets that make sense for a specific team, because at that point, of course, the boards are all really specific for teams on guys who they had either worked out or went to and attended pro days. But for me right now, I've got running back Breece Hall out of Iowa State. I think he could be another good complement to Javonte Williams. He can really hit the long ball. Good home run hitter at the running back spot, and someone who could catch some more passes than what we saw from a guy like Mike Boone as a backup running back. Now, I don't think Breece Hall is necessarily the biggest need, but I do think he would be an upgrade over Mike Boone, even though I do like Mike Boone as a running back. Edge Boye Mafe, U of M product as well. He is a nice edge player. He's going to be able to sit into a 3-4 at the D-end position. I don't necessarily see him as a true outside linebacker rushing, but I think there is some value in there. He probably would be a year or 2 development project before he's really ready to take meaningful snaps. But I think that he is someone who could come in and give you a little bit of production once he finally is ready for the NFL stage. Sevyn Banks, a cornerback out of Ohio State, formerly thought of as a round 1 or round 2 pick before the season started, had a little bit of a down year at Ohio State. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in round 7 potentially. And I think that could be a really good pickup for Denver. I know they don't need cornerback play, but Sevyn Banks could be a nice option for them, someone who they could really develop, which they do a really good job there of developing in Denver. And then also Bubba Bolden, safety out of Miami. He could be an intriguing safety pickup. For me, Denver's got to find a way to address safety, linebacker, edge on that defense. Just one of each would really get the job done, and then quarterback. That's really all you have to look at if you're Denver. This has been my offseason preview for the Denver Broncos. My season prediction for them next year, it's dependent on the quarterback spot. The range, I think they could be a Super Bowl contender. If they get a guy like Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers, maybe even Kirk Cousins is enough to push them up into a real playoff threat at least. I could see them being a Super Bowl contender. Or I could see them being a 7-10 team again. I don't see them regressing. I don't see them losing more games. I think that they're going to be about where they were this year or better. And I really think better is the more likely outcome. It just depends on what they can get done in free agency. And I think it's got to start with Aaron Rodgers. Again, hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well. That's really the key thing. I need you guys to hit that subscribe button for me. It really does mean a lot. Check out some of our other videos on the channel as well. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. You guys are the best viewers in the entire planet. We feel so lucky to have your love and support. Again, thanks so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.